Today I want to tell you an ancient tale. But before I do that, I'd like to lay the groundwork for understanding the role of story in our lives. There's a process that is going on today that I call destorification. It's a made-up word, but I think it fits very well as a descriptor of what's going on today. And it is a close cousin of deforestation. And you know, if we cut down all the trees in a forest and replant pine trees in nice, neat rows, the life in that forest never comes back in the way it was when it was an old growth forest. And the same is true for us when we stop finding places to tell stories and stop telling stories in our lives. There is a process of destorification that goes on, and as we'll discuss in a few minutes, stories and storytelling have been replaced by things like screens and televisions and iPhones and iPads. But let me tell you an ancient tale, and it's from the Phaedrus by Plato. Some of you may have read that some long time ago in school. And there's a very curious piece of story at the very end. And it's about Thuth, who was a god, and Thamus, who was the king of Egypt. And Thuth was the creator of everything, and especially all the inventions that were important for humankind. And one day he came to Thamus. He was very excited. And Thamus was kind of like the good housekeeping seal of approval. And he had to approve all of these inventions of Thuth before they became rolled out to humanity. Thuth was particularly excited this day because he had invented writing. And he was so enthusiastic because he said, you know, with writing, people will never forget anything. Thamus contemplated this for a moment. And he said, my friend, actually, the opposite is the case. Once people write things down, they'll never have a reason to remember anything. And it will be stored away and never to be seen again. Now, it's hard to argue against writing. We all love to read books, and we love to document the things that we do in our work, in our life, in all kinds of ways. But it turns out that oral culture is still perhaps the most powerful way of sharing knowledge and information with each other. A long time ago, I was working with Walt Disney Imagineering, and they were interested in how knowledge was shared among the Imagineers. And after every big project, the engineers would have to write an after-action review. It was a copiously detailed report, sometimes hundreds of pages. These reports would be filed away on the 9th floor of WDI in Orlando. And as I went out and interviewed various Imagineers, I said, you know, when you were getting ready to start a new project, did you ever go up to the 9th floor to read about maybe what some other Imagineer had done on a similar project? Not one of them had ever gone up to look at those reports. Now, what would they do? If they were, for example, building a new water slide park, they would seek out the person who had designed one of those water slide parks maybe 10 or 15 years previously. If they sent them an email, that person would probably send them a cursory kind of comment or two about what they had learned. But if they came and knocked on the door and said, do you got a minute? Well, that minute would turn into hours as they sat, and that person would unpack all the things that they had seen and done, and all the mistakes they had made, and all the successful things they had done. So you, as a young designer, would be able to profit from that. So you have to wonder today, as we immerse ourselves in digital media, all these small screens, and spend so much time on the internet seeking information through Google, what have we lost? What have we lost? And one of the things we're finding, and the research is showing, is that our attention spans are actually shrinking. They're really getting shorter. People who are multi-screen users, who really spend a lot of time on screens, their attention span has shrunken over the last years from about 12 to 14 seconds to about 8 seconds. A goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds. So we're not doing so well. Now, there are exceptions. I have a dear friend whose son spent a lot of time on screens as a child. He's now a Top Gun in the Air Force. And probably a lot of his dexterity, hand-eye, and coordination and being able to respond to visual input was learned using those devices. But all we have to do is look at what's going on in Silicon Valley and the behavior of parents with their children, and they're limiting the amount of time they're spending on these screens. They know that there is something destructive about them if we spend too much time on them. So the question is, how do we begin to rebuild an oral culture? And we're so immersed in media, we don't even realize what we've lost. There's been a process of slow destorification going on for many generations now. Maybe about 30, 40 years ago, there was a guy named Jerry Mander who had started the first nonprofit advertising agency to work mainly with indigenous people. And the Inuit of Northwest Canada at the time were being pressured by the Canadian government to get wired for cable. And it was a big debate whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. And they invited Jerry Mander to come up and consult with them. And he obviously had a negative bias toward television and was afraid of what it was going to do to their culture. But the people, they listened and they argued and they voted to bring in TV. And he said what he saw was that overnight, the culture died, literally died. All the oral storytelling that used to happen and which was used to pass on values, to teach children, kind of came to a standstill. People were watching TV 8, 10, 12, 14 hours a day. Behavior problems in schools began to expand geometrically. Grandparents who were there charged to take care of the children, because they often lived with 3 generations under one roof, were spending all their time watching these soap operas during the day. And they were praying for the lives of these people. They didn't have any distinction that these weren't real people. and these people's lives were needing prayer, to say the least. Children began to devalue their own culture as they were watching some of the TV shows that emanated from the lower 48 states, and things like Dallas that painted pictures of opulence. And when they compared their world with that, they began to not see their world with great value. So we have to wonder what has happened to us as we have slowly been immersed in all that media, and what have we lost? What have we lost in the process? So the question is, can storytelling, oral storytelling, be the antidote to many of the things that ail us today? Can it be the exact thing that we need more than anything else, is to build central fires, whether they're physical or metaphorical, for us to gather around and to hear each other's tales?